suddenly you and your neighbors no longer have clean water to use. What would you do? Well, you could get in touch with the people who represent you and your neighbors in the US government. You might write to them or visit them and tell them about the problem. Let's say that they agree with you that the water from the river should be kept clean. So what's next? Your representative could introduce a bill into Congress. It gets a number and a name. Let's say the bill is called the Keep Rivers Clean Bill. Representatives in Congress then discuss the bill. Congress is made up of two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. If a majority of representatives in both the House and Senate vote for the bill, then it goes to the President of the US for approval. If the President signs the bill, then it becomes the Keep Rivers Clean law. Now everyone who lives along the river must keep pollution out of the river, and you and your neighbors can water your lawns and wash your dogs again. That's how we get a national law. It comes from people living any place in the US, working together with their representative government. As Abraham Lincoln said, the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Here I am! I've just hiked to the top of Pikes Peak in Colorado. I know, it's not the tallest of mountain peaks, but it's way up there. I wanted to see the Rocky Mountains, and there's a great view from the top.
Well, you're right. You're not on the tallest, but you are in the longest mountain chain in the US, the Rocky Mountains. They run through part of the West.
The Rocky Mountains were formed about 90 million years ago. Getting over these tall and jagged peaks was a huge obstacle for early settlers moving westward. It's one of the reasons that the states in the western part of the US were settled last.
Alicia, I'm adding 2 more things to my list. I'm in the biggest state in size, and it's also the coldest. It's Alaska, and it's a long way away from the other 48 states I've been traveling through.
Oh wow, that's right! It says here that the coldest temperature ever recorded in the US was in Alaska, minus 80 degrees. It's a good thing that you packed a lot of different kinds of clothes for your trip.
The climate of the US is incredibly varied. Climate is the type of weather that a place has over a long period of time. It includes things like temperature, rainfall, and wind. Climate is influenced by the land and water around a place, as well as by how near or far a place is from the equator. Depending on where you are in the US, you could find yourself experiencing different weather. In some places, the weather changes a lot from season to season. In other places, the weather remains the same almost all year round.
Talk about extremes. Now I'm in the hottest, driest place in the West. Well, actually, in the whole US. Death Valley in Southern California. The park ranger said that one time it reached 134 degrees. I can't believe that anything at all can survive here.
Death Valley is an amazing place. I've learned that not only is it the hottest and the driest, but it's the lowest place in the entire US too. It's also a national park, and a perfect place for rattlesnakes, rats, and coyotes to live.
Death Valley is in a dry area called the Intermountain region, between the Rocky Mountains and the mountain ranges that are further west. Within the Intermountain region, there are basins, valleys, and plateaus. The largest desert area in the US is in this region, in an area called the Great Basin. A basin is a low, bowl-shaped area with higher land around it. There are several valleys in the Intermountain region, as well as in other parts of the US, such as the Hudson River Valley or the Sacramento River Valley. A valley is a low area of land, usually between mountains or hills. A plateau is an area of mostly flat land that rises above the land surrounding it, such as the Colorado Plateau. It is an area that includes parts of Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. This plateau is carved through with canyons, deep narrow valleys with steep sides. The Grand Canyon is located in the Colorado Plateau.
The Grand Canyon was carved out by the Colorado River, digging through layers and layers and layers of rock over millions of years.
Alicia, there are so many different kinds of places in the US. It's a good thing I brought my camera, so I'll have pictures of all the amazing places that I'm visiting.
You know, the US is huge. To understand it better, it would help to look at the big picture.
Hi, my name is Hannah Staplewska and I have the coolest job. I'm a geographer, but unlike most geographers who work in the field, I use images taken from space to look at geography on the Earth. Satellite images are taken by a camera which is in orbit above the Earth. The satellite imagery can be used by engineers looking to build new roads who can use the imagery to create maps, farmers to see where they need to water their crops and whether the crops are healthy or not. By using satellite imagery, the Forest Service can look at the types of trees and grass that exist in an area and from that try to plan how a fire may burn should one start. Once a fire is burning, satellite imagery can be used to see how it's progressing, where it's moving to, and how much damage has been done. Our imagery can show some very interesting features. Some of my favorites include the Colorado River, either at the Hoover Dam or at the Grand Canyon. We also have great images of the Kennedy Space Center and New York's Central Park. The best thing about working as a geographer with satellite imagery is that it allows me a unique perspective on how the land changes and how man's interaction with his environment affects the geography that he encounters.
The map that is most useful to me so far is a road map. We are driving to many places, but the US is so big that sometimes we fly on a plane too. From the plane, I can see farmland, mountains, and cities.
Flying, driving, canoeing, hiking. There are all kinds of ways to get around the US.
Long Before the airplane was invented, people were traveling around the US just much more slowly. The Native Americans who called the US home used canoes to travel on the lakes and rivers. Horses were brought to the US by Europeans, and soon both Native Americans and settlers used them to get from place to place. Horse-drawn carriages were used much like the cars of today. Except horses had to rest along the way. Settlers moving westward across the country connected their horses to covered wagons so that they could carry their belongings with them. Settlers also moved west on the rivers. People used them like roads, traveling in flatboats and later paddle boats. As the US was being settled, railroads were slowly being built. For a time, the railroad was the fastest way to travel really long distances. Then, Americans fell in love with another way of getting around, the car. At first, people drove their cars very short distances. As the cars became more reliable, people started driving them further and further. Early roads in America were mostly made of dirt. After a big rain, cars could get stuck in the mud, so Americans began building better roads. Today, the interstate highway system connects states with wide paved roads. Freight is shipped by truck on the roads, and people can get from city to city quickly. Automobiles and roads meant that newer cities in the US could be more spread out. But soon, another way of getting around the US grew popular: the airplane. Airline routes crisscross the country, and airplanes have changed the US economy. Places in the middle of the US can get fresh seafood caught on the coasts delivered on the same day. Cities with cold weather can get freshly cut flowers from warmer parts of the US. Before air transport, it wasn't possible for products like flowers and seafood to reach stores so quickly. All the different forms of transportation, ways of getting around our cities and country, are an important part of America's economy. From canoes to cars to airplanes, getting around the US has come a long way.
Alicia, you know one thing I've noticed about the US? People who live here seem to be from all over the world.
Well, you're right. Most of the people in the US came from somewhere else at one time, or at least their families did.
Immigrants are people who come from one country and go to live in another. And when they come to the US, they bring with them their own culture. Culture includes the traditions of a group of people, such as language, holidays, religion, food, and music. The traditions that different groups bring with them often become a part of America's culture too. This diversity is one of the things that make America culturally rich and unique.
Alicia, I have really seen some amazing things in the US. Each region has something really interesting, and even though it's huge, I have a better idea now about how the areas of the United States are both different and similar in many ways. This is a great country,